I've been trying to find the right metaphor for this moment that we're in. I live in California, and sometimes we have earthquakes, and then there are aftershocks. And I think we're in a period of the aftershocks. The pandemic rocked the world in so many ways and rocked our workplaces. And in this period of aftershocks, what we're seeing is tremendous challenges for employees, managers, senior leaders, entrepreneurs. Businesses are struggling and people are struggling. One of the disturbing conditions of this moment is that well-being has plummeted in workplaces all over the world. And at 6 Seconds, we published the world's largest study of emotional intelligence. It's about to come out, and we're seeing massive shifts, the biggest changes that we've seen in 15 years of doing this research. In this period of aftershocks, we're in a time of recalibration and people are struggling. Loneliness is tremendously high. Stress is tremendously high. And the level of complexity and uncertainty continues. And yet we're exhausted from these last few years. The 2020s so far have been quite a ride. And so we're going to have a panel today with international experts to share with us perspectives on workplace well-being and what it means to create workplaces where people can actually thrive and we can navigate through this storm, to change metaphors. I'd like to bring on our panelists and ask them to introduce themselves with an answer to a question. I tried to come up with my one word and I said aftershocks. I'd like you to each introduce yourself by telling us your word or phrase that represents the workplace today. And Carla, let's start with you.
Hello, I'm Carla Olivieri. I'm from Peru. I'm a mother of 5, CEO of Activa Group, and former president of a university in Peru. And the word I choose is excitement.
Thank you. Manuela.
I have been with Accenture for several years, and I am very happy with my job. I work within the HR team and in the talent strategy. And my word is caring, well-being caring. That is the first word that I think about when you answer when you pose the question.
Thank you, Manuela. All right, so we've got Peru and Italy, and now let's go to Sweden with Frederick. Go for it, Frederick. What's your word? Whoops. Looks like Frederick is frozen. Frederick's word is frozen. Okay, well, we'll come back. Come back to Frederick in a minute. What's one of the reasons that you think that workplace well-being is in the place where it is? Frederick, it looks like you're back.
Yes, I am. Sorry for that. Thank you for having me. Yes.
We decided
my name is
frozen.
Yeah, the internet broke down, so everything is moving all the time, and that's actually the word I would like to bring into this. But my name is Fredrik Thorberger. I'm a consultant manager at the Foresight Consultancy, working with trying to understand the future and help organizations navigate it. And my word for the workplace today is change, because that's what we see among all our customers in all aspects, about sustainability, about digitalization, about recruiting and retaining the right people. So there's a lot of pressure from the change from the outer world.
Fantastic. So thank you. I was just going to go to another question, which is, why is well-being so low? We're seeing ADT just released. I don't know if ADT does this in any of your countries, but in 60 countries, they just released new data that showed workplace well-being at an all-time low. What's your sense from where you are in the world and who you work with? What is driving well-being down?
Starts.
Emanuela? Go for it,
okay. I think in a way well-being is low because we're starting to make ourselves questions. We're starting to put this topic in the agenda, which wasn't there before. We used to lead our lives very separate: work life, personal life, and with the pandemic, everything was highlighted and integrated, and it became a very strong confusion. And we kind of weren't prepared to manage anxiety. It's very hard to manage anxiety, and we realized that uncertainty and the fast-paced world and the unpredictability that we live in is really tough to manage. And we also felt fragile. I think the pandemic made us feel very fragile, but I think it's the other way around, because as a mother of 5, I was really, really scared, like everybody. And at that moment, I was president of a university, so I was scared for all of my students, the business, and everything. But I learned that as a competitive swimmer that I am, you feel anxiety all the time. Your hands sweat, your heart pounds, and you feel like, oh my God, I don't want to go to the competition. And it's the same feelings that you feel when something is scary, when you lose your job or whatever. So if you, I think that it became low because we kind of got lost track of learning what to attach anxiety to. And you can attach anxiety to feeling overwhelmed and something negative. My plane is going to be delayed. My vacation is going to rain every day. Or you can link your anxiety to maybe I win this competition. Maybe I have a good time. So in a way, we lost ground of what settles us, or how we can fix ourselves as human beings and not feel like an ant in the world. So I think that all the questions that came up with the pandemic made us feel very fragile.
Yeah, I can build on that, because I believe I agree with you in the sense that the pandemic arose a lot of questions about what's the purpose of things. And I think especially among young people, but also generally speaking, people are wondering, okay, at least in my part of the world, we have reached a great material standard, but what now? Is it worth it? We are challenging the ecological systems, if they're working or not. Is it valuable to have this lifestyle where we work so hard to consume so much? But also something you said, Carla, about how we direct anxiety and what our relationship to having negative emotions, or if you call it that way, or distress in some sense. Because you mentioned, Joshua, that the numbers are the lowest in the last 15 years. And during these 15 years, we also had the younger generations entering the work market. And what we can see about this generation is that they talk more openly about their inner life, I would say, compared to older generations. They're more open about being troubled, having anxiety, and so on. I sense that they expect more from the employer when it comes to being supportive to the individual psychological health, but also that the idea of what life should be has changed. That's something that's very much discussed here in Sweden, in a way, that the idea that life could be almost without anxiety or without stress. That ideal has become, in a sense, distorted, I would say, for some people, not for everybody, but for some people. And I think that also shows, that's also a reason why the numbers are going down more, in the bigger picture over time, because younger people have other expectations.
Yeah, and Joshua, even before the pandemic period, which I think was a time when so many companies thought about wellness, I'm used about wellness in Accenture because Accenture has already had a focus on employee well-being. So we talk about well-being in 360 degree, because our proposition focuses on so many components of well-being, so body, mind, and financial well-being. So I think that the pandemic moment is the moment where we think about this. That is important, but the proposition in Accenture start before. So that is for me the power, and I really believe on this, because we develop a lot of program for employees, because after the pandemic we increased the number of proposition. We really build a proposition, but before we believe that people, if they stay better, if we feel loved, if we feel engaged, they work better. So it's caring, but it's also a economical result. So why do not work on this?
I want to come back to that kind of business case in a minute and share some data with you that reinforces part of what this generational difference. First of all, this is the comparison from 2018 to 2022 on emotional intelligence scores. This is from the State of the Heart study that's coming out in a couple of weeks. And we'll pop in the chat a link where you can get the report. But you can see every competency of emotional intelligence that we measure across 140 countries has declined. Three biggest declines all happen to be in something that we call drive. Exercising optimism is about seeing new possibilities. Pursuing noble goals is about connecting your larger purpose to this moment. And engaging intrinsic motivation is about finding that energy within. And so those three things combine into this kind of internal capacity, this emotional intelligence capacity, to generate the energy that we need and catalyze ourselves and others. So you'll notice overall emotional intelligence declined, but these three declined dramatically since 2019. And there's maybe some good news coming up here. Any thoughts about what you're seeing that anyone would like to share at this point?
So Joshua, at this point in Accenture, we try to really share the purpose of Accenture. And you know that sometimes Accenture change brand expression, change slogan, change. So it's because it's a big company. So also for people to follow all the change, sometimes it's difficult to find a way of receive the right communication. So just for this reason, because we organize a lot of internal survey, and that is a point that we underline also last year and also this year. So to focus on why I work, what is the reason why? Because if people understand the why and the reason and the part of the entire wall, they work better, they understand the reason, and they really become the first actor in the film, in the play. So we are working a lot to create an unboxing of the purpose, try to explain better the reason why, because if you align my goal to the goal of Accenture, wow, that's a bingo.
Yes.
So that is my point of view. And I believe a lot on this, absolutely.
Yes, I'd like to add on that because that's one of my most favorite subjects in the world. Only 3% of human beings have a personal strategic plan, and 100% of the top 500 firms in the world have a strategic plan. So if a strategic plan defines a destiny that you fall in love with, it fills you up with illusion, with excitement, and it's the main fuel for motivation to become resilient and forward-looking, future-looking also. And you turn your anxiety into excitement and not only something negative and scary. So I think that companies, I also work in organizations in leadership programs, and companies do invest a lot on building this corporate culture, which is fantastic, and it has to continue. They have their vision, mission, values, purpose, etc. But what Emanuela said, aligning the company's DNA with the person's, your personal purpose, which very few people develop, is magic. It's so potent. And when you have those two connected, you multiply what I like to call your mental muscle, and you work hard on it, and you become really, really strong. And if you have strong muscles, you're more agile, you're more eager to respond and more positively to uncertainty, embrace difficulties as something challenging and fun. You fall in love with problems because they're exciting, etc. So we need to, companies need to get more involved in helping their employees develop their own personal purpose and have this match. And do it with your husband and your wife also, because as a family is an organization also.
Frederick, let's go back to the point you made about generations and building on what Manuela and Carla said. You'll notice that for Gen Z, basically in this graph, basically the younger you are, the worse this effect has been in these last few years. And you can see Gen Z on this drive strand, this combination of optimism, purpose, and intrinsic motivation has maybe the biggest pain. And I'm wondering what does that mean to you?
If I understood the previous picture correctly, there was a decrease also in pursuing noble goals. And Carla was talking about the positive effects of having noble goals and focusing on something larger, something bigger. And for me, that's also, in a way, it's another way of talking about something we could call a spiritual dimension of being a human being, having something above survival, above getting your food on the table and so on. And I would interpret that one reason might be why people don't focus that much on noble goals is that the basics has been less what should I say, accessible. I mean, inflation, the work situation for some people, rising prices and so on, which makes the fundamentals of life has become higher on the priority because it's not obviously there for everyone. It has never been, but now it's more people sensing that there are limitations, and on that adding, of course, a general sense of scarcity when it comes to how we use the resources on this planet. So I think if we see a population less focusing on noble goals is also a way of one way of interpreting that is that's a spiritual dislocation. You are off track in where you can't focus really on the higher levels because you're focusing on the lower levels in life, the more fundamentals possibly, and that's an important signal. I like the idea of seeing, for example, depression as a symptom of spiritual scarcity, that your life is not spiritual enough. You're not engaging that part of yourself, that part of the brain that is actually designed to work with religion or the bigger questions, the sense of meaning, the sense of being part of a universe that's meaningful for you. And that is, of course, I mean, it's something you want in life. You want to have that sense. You actually get sick if you lose it too long time. We need that psychological medicine or should I say vaccine maybe towards depression and so on. So maybe it's an expression that people see that the most basic parts of life are not necessarily there for them, or they are worried about it in a way. But then, of course, again, you show the Gen Z, the burnout. Is it? I mean, the difficult thing about these statistics, we were working with statistics a lot as we make surveys about thousands of people, some mostly in Sweden, but also around the world. And the difficult part is to know if the respondents of these questions, if the baby boomers, is it the same emotional experience they call burnout as the Gen Z? Or Gen Z calling something lighter burnout? We don't know, and I won't claim either way, but there's room for interpretation here.
So one of the things that I'm thinking about is in our workplaces, I think that we have counted on younger generations to kind of infuse more energy, infuse more, well, we should try this, and kind of maybe provoke a certain amount of adaptability and change in organizations. And that is often frustrating for the younger people and the older people, right? Like, can't we just do it my way? But if we're seeing this younger generation coming into the workforce low in optimism and low in this sense that, I mean, we've heard so much about Gen Z being idealistic, and yet this data is saying Gen Z, in this combination of optimism, motivation, and sense of purpose, is the lowest across 140 countries. There's something to me like that seems like against nature in some way.
But it's interesting if you say that they're more idealistic. I wouldn't say that you might be more optimistic just for being idealistic. It could be the opposite, the other way around. Because if I'm idealistic, but I feel that the world is cynical, and we have numbers showing that young people believe to a larger degree in conspiracy theories, for example, who's really ruling the world? Is democracy really working? Are the leaders really there for us? And so on. And you can be very idealistic, and you can use that as a way of describing it. You start from a higher level of expectation because you're idealistic. People can be great. Politicians can be honest. The system could work for people, but it doesn't. What does it do? What does it do to my optimism? It crashes, of course. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way, what you're talking about, which is interesting, we have been following different generations in the workplace for decades, and when we look at young people and the expectations from the older people, like you say, young people seem to be, as a group, they want to box work into a box where you can see this is the start, this is the end, this is the expectations. I start my workday, I end my workday, but it's something that I can control because I'm very stress adverse. I don't want stress in my life. I don't want one phone, even if the employee would pay for my private calls. I don't want it. I want two phones so I can put away the work phone and I can be free when so there's something here about being wanting more control of your private life and not being entangled in work, and not necessarily wanting more responsibility either. We can see that changes between younger generations now and 20 years ago. Younger generations were more interested in having more influence, more responsibility, meeting a lot of people, be out there where it happens. And we can see young people today, of course, there are some people who want that, but as a group, not necessarily.
Manuela, I'm curious about, in the Italian context, I know that a very large number of Italian businesses are small businesses, family businesses, very often with an entrepreneur who's quite a bit older than me. And I remember before the pandemic, a lot of kind of tension of people like my age saying, when is my dad going to retire? Right. And so I'm curious what you're seeing in Italian business in terms of these generational differences and what's happening with kind of this upheaval that we're in.
So the result between boomer and young people for me is not a surprise. I work a lot with a startup in the innovation contest, and I imagine that now in this moment the market of innovation, the market of startup, scale up, become more bigger day by day in Italy. And because people would like to put to work directly in the content, directly in some project that they believe, that they feel in our hands. And my perspective is that if you want to really motivate people and try to really involve young people, we have to work leading by example and to involve in the first time, absolutely, because the reason why the boomer don't suffer about the burnout is because they have all the instrument to work on and to navigate the change. And young people, this is my experience in Accenture, because we really have a lot of new joiners every month. I create a new joiner. We create a new joiner experience just to involve and participate and in person. And they need absolutely to be an example, to be a role model, to look at a role model, to look at someone that can explain, because they want to be more follow. They want to be more instrument to understand, because I am very curious, and in my life that is my best strength. So I try to understand better about the company, about the organization. Now people stay in the quiet situation. They leave that the organization try to share the information. So if you don't immediately involve,
technology trouble there.
Yeah, technology. Okay, if you don't involve immediately, so it's so difficult, and so they prefer no.
We'll come back to you in a second, Manuela, while you figure that out. Carla, you want to share what you were about to say before?
Something else about the younger generations, the Gen Zs, is that to add on what Frederick was saying, and I think that the pandemic has been maybe the first time that they've experienced a disruption in their lives. Most of us have lived, at least in Peru, we're used to it. I was used to it, 7,000% inflation, terrorism. We've had like 7 presidents in the last 6 years. So we were used to many changes. Change, your word, Frederick, was part of our breakfast. So, but not for the younger generation. This pandemic was the first time that they experienced this change. They blocked themselves. They became really, really scared, and the way they deal with frustration is very different. They don't have a way to relate with frustration, and it kind of classifies them. You're either good or bad, and they are focused on the outcome. And the younger generation, and us also, we have forgotten to enjoy and learn from the process. And in companies too, because what we do when we have all these prizes and with celebrations in the companies, we celebrate results, and we forget to give an employee the pat in the back to reward their effort. So effort has to be elevated again. And also it brings fluidity in our lives, and also discipline. The younger generation have a very hard relationship with discipline. I have a TikTok account and I dedicate it to the younger generation, and I give tips for students because of my life in university. And they cannot deal with frustration. Discipline and procrastination defines them as lazy, and then they label themselves. And it's not like that. Discipline or self-discipline is freedom. It means that you have control of your life in a way. You define a destiny, you control your body, you make a million of little promises for you, and you comply with them. You become accountable to yourself, and that gives you freedom. If you don't have discipline, you are subject to becoming a victim to everything that comes outside of you and the environment, and you are dependent on the likes and the
Right. So I want to turn back to our organizations for a minute, and there was a comment from Saul that I want to pop up here, which is about the intersection of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and well-being, and this piece about psychological safety, physical safety, emotional safety, and the lack of trust. And we saw in our research last year, it's the vitality research, that trust, again, was absolutely crucial. 74% correlation between workforce performance and trust scores in teams. The U.S. Surgeon General recently released a framework for workplace mental health and well-being, and talks a lot about this idea, which is, it's very pertinent in the US. I don't know about in your countries, that if people who are marginalized aren't feeling safe, they're not going to be as well, and they're not going to perform as well. And I think that the connection here, it's like, if we make workplaces that only work for people who look like me, that's not a very effective workplace in the world today, at least in this country. So who are we making workplaces work for? And how do we make it work for the people who it's not working for?
I think there's a paradox when it comes to these topics, because when I look at Swedish young people, and we, like you said, Carla, in my country, we weren't used to change for breakfast, but the last youngest generation have been facing more crisis than most Swedes, I would say, since things are changing here as well. But what the paradox I'm talking about is, we have been investing a lot of time and effort in schools, in NGOs like the Boy Scouts or football, soccer clubs or whatever. We have been talking very much about respect, mutual respect. You shouldn't bully people. You have to respect people, different sexual orientation. We have talked about racism. We have talked all about these kind of taboos or discriminating behaviors. And we have tried to make people very nice towards each other and very tolerant. And the strange thing, it seems that we at the same time have made people more sensitive. people are reacting.
More
Emanuela said something very, very clever, I think. It's easier to be a baby boomer, because when a baby boomer were growing up, the world was, from a value perspective, it wasn't free from racism at all, or those kind of problems. People were discriminated as well in Sweden as everywhere else. But generally, if you're part of the majority population, a baby boomer, the directions were quite easy. It was work hard, do your job, be accountable, that's it, do it. If you're a man, you're a man. If you're a woman, you're a woman, and so on. And there, of course, downsides with such a simple way of looking at life, and such an unaware way of looking at relationship and minorities and majorities and so on. But the paradox, which is hard to deal with in a sense, is that when we talk about things, we also make people more sensitive to things, it seems to me. So it has been a problem in schools and so on. Pupils towards teachers, they are feeling that they are being mistreated in a sense that old generations a little bit, but hey, what did you expect? If you do like that in the classroom, somebody will react. No, but you mustn't do that. It's my rights and so on. So it's more like a cognitive sense of being mistreated than an emotional experience. I'm being mistreated. And that is a difficult thing to deal with, because we don't want to make people more sensitive by talking about all the things all the time, if you get me. But at the same time, it's very, very important to do, as you say, Josh, to make the workplace open for everybody. So we have to talk about it in a sense to make people more aware. So it's a difficult paradox. I'm more than happy to hear about Emanuela and Carla's experiences from these areas, if you have the same development in your countries. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know in Peru, there's been many, many years of challenge around this topic of who is in the kind of wealthy group. And there's a lot of divisions that have to do with ethnicity and class. What are you seeing in terms of workplaces and how we make workplaces safe for all and welcome for all?
Yes, it's still a big issue. And like Frederick has said, it's making everybody hypersensitive. And everybody's starting to get scared of what they say, how they say it. And in our case, in Spanish, like in Italian, we have the la silla, chair is feminine, the table is feminine, and the world is masculine. So now there's a big struggle about that. So I don't believe in inclusive language, because I feel like a woman no matter what, and I gain my respect in other ways. But people get angry at me when I don't say todos y todas and things like that. So it's dividing us. The world is becoming much more polarized, and not only in politics, we see it in our day-to-day life. So tolerance has, our efforts to bring more tolerance has made us a little more intolerant. So there's no easy way out on this. Like I said, society has lost its fluidity. It's more liquid.
My idea about this is that the word is a patent, because when I was young, my thought was, okay, I have to invest in my competency, in my life, in my work, in my family. So I want to work hard, because later someone will arrive at all level. And people now don't have any kind of patience. So if I don't gain now, I will leave immediately, because I have not enough patience to stay in the job, in the relationship, in the emotion. So the effort for my personal work, because I work regarding the employee experience, is try to transform the experience of the employee in every moment in the best experience every day. But the effort it's every day bigger than bigger, because they don't have absolutely patience. They need to change every time. They need to be involved every time. They need to stay at the best level in every moment. If you don't really have the right timing, that's it.
Can I add something that I think it's, I've been, like I said, in a competitive swimmer, in sports all my life. And I think that learning to develop a competitive mindset is very important, and to differentiate it from rivalry. Because right now what we have is you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, rivals. You're a feminist and an anti-feminism, rivals. So this polarization is rivalry. And when you develop what Fredrik said, that in Sweden you're starting the scouts and sports to develop more respect and tolerance. That's very nice, but it should be talked more, because when you are in sports, you know there's competition, but they're not your rivals. You know what they're good at, and you leave them there, and you focus on your race. It's your race. I race against myself at improving myself so I can become a better person and I can serve better and improve somebody else's life. But now we're focusing on how, if you're doing badly, I'm going to do better. If males lose jobs, women are going to be better. So that's toxic. It's horrible.
So I want to go back.
Josh, please. I feel like I need to answer your question as well. How can we do to make the workplace open for everybody? And I think, like Carla mentioned, society has been divided by identity politics in a way. We've been sensitive about it. And I think that, and the fact that we are moving through so much change, increases the demand on a leader to be able to connect on a personal level. I have to see you, Josh, as a man, someone, a person. I'm not just a man of certain age or background. Never mind, I don't care. I need to be close enough to understand what you are, what your drives are, how I can support you, and what your needs are. So all these kind of stereotypes and ideas and concepts be dropped to the floor, and I can be there facing you. And that's a challenge for people, especially if you are a manager with a background, for example, in technology or something else. You have been rewarded, you have been climbing to become a manager by being very good at some kind of topic or something, and for some people it's a challenge to be on that personal yet not private relationship with someone else. But I think that is what is needed, and I would like to broaden that to say that's a general thing in society today. When we have a tendency to polarization and more conflict, as a politician, for example, or whatever, you have to be, the more we are able to connect to people on a very personal, face-to-face dialogue level, the more easily the society can morph itself through these time of change. We can't do it from top down. We can't do it from a set of simple principles. We have to do it by dialogue, very human to human. And I think that's one of the ways of open up workplace to everything, to everybody.
And I wonder, in the context of, again, this data that we shared, we're seeing these big losses in emotional intelligence. And one of the pieces that we didn't talk about is this competency that we call navigating emotions. And we see this way down here, this ability to harness emotions, use emotions proactively instead of reacting. And so that suggests that our global capacity to handle the kind of emotional turmoil and to shift out of reaction and into intentional response is deeply compromised. And yet the need is higher than ever. And if what we're saying is, well, the path to really effective leadership today is that we connect emotionally, that increase empathy, but we also create the right kind of emotional state that allows us to work with people and not move into polarization. It's an interesting puzzle.
Yeah, for me, regarding these intelligent emotional intelligence competencies, the role and the level that now becoming crisis is the manager that follow and that have the role to enhance, to learn, to be the role model, because these kind of people don't have change the paradigm to follow people, to measure people, to speak with people, to listen. So that's the problem, because that is a shift.
Yes, and in this context of well-being, right, where more employees are coming to you as a manager saying, I'm not doing okay.
Okay, and the communication arrive until the manager level, that they are able to strong have the effort to understand the communication that arrive from the top level, but then they don't have the possibility to spread and to manage, to involve other people, because the soft skill, the emotional intelligence skill is difficult to apply, is difficult to learn. And they are absolutely don't be able to do, because before they work with other paradigm. Work are the result, outcome, achievement.
Task oriented.
Absolutely. So the cascading go no in the right way in this moment. That's the really critical.
Yes, burnout is not really the quantity of work that the number of hours, but the quality of the work and the role.
Absolutely.
And it's basically it's about bad managers. No, bad managers, like Emanuela said, that don't communicate effectively, that are unfair treatment among peers, and there's no clarity in the objectives and what's expected of me, and they're more interested in the results than in the individual. So the real empathy is showing a true, sincere, authentic worry and caring for the individual. You're not achieving the results. I'm worried about you. What's going on?
But our organizational systems are not set up for that. Our managers are being told, like, you need to hit this number. And the manager's like, but my people are struggling. Well, that's not my problem.
Yeah. We in Accenture, we work a lot to train the middle level, and with the emotional intelligence workshop, training, focus, webinar. But I think that the change is because they speak different languages, so we can again try to find the unique language that they use to speak, and that you use really to connect young
Frederick,
people with
in
people
Sweden, is this dynamic happening where, I mean, we did a survey where we found 8% of managers said they were equipped to deal with the emotional challenges of their employees are facing.
Well, my perception is that the Swedish work life is more soft in a way, less hierarchical than some other countries. We are very consensus oriented in Sweden, which sometimes causes stress because you don't get the clarity and direction at the worst end of it. The good end, that it's not very common with a stereotype of boss lashing people into work, because there's more of a more listening and less hierarchical way. I think that's the best way to put it. But what I think is interesting about this data of navigating emotions you showed us, Joshua, and if I perceive that the term correctly is about my own ability to navigate the emotions I experience and to deal and choose what to do, experience emotions and choose how to do and act when experience these. Am I right, Josh?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not just managing, but harnessing, using them to help us move forward.
Yeah, and what this I would like to hear Carla and Emanuela giving their pictures, their image of, because in Sweden we have been training kids to listen to themselves, to strengthen their self-esteem by saying that your emotions are valuable. You need to stand for your opinions, and when you meet other people's, you shouldn't fall down and accept everybody else's truth or their feelings as something more valuable than your own feelings. So in a sense, I believe the last decades we have helped people, we have raised people to listen more inwards, and that's a good development in sense if you compare it to my grandparents, which were much less taught to listen to their heart in that sense. The downside with that is that if you say to people you should listen more to your heart, and they start from, say, like a small kid, if they take that too far, they don't need to filter their emotions. Their emotions are the truth. This is my truth. This is what is real for me. So that's why I can argue for my standpoint, or I can demand what I want. And my emotions are never questioned because they are true. They are really something that I should respect. And that might be a reason why it's hard. You're not encouraged to be able to deal with your emotions in an intelligent way and say, I'm feeling this, I would like to do this, I would like to say that, but I might not. It might be disrespectful, or it might be not good in the long term. But if you're taught that your emotions are very valuable and they shouldn't be what should I say, disrespected by someone else, then there's no reason for you to develop this skill that you are measuring. And Carla talked about being able to compete with other people without having rivalry. And I think that's a good point, because if you can compete, it means you're ready to lose. And losing doesn't kill you. But if your emotions are true, when I lose and I feel sad about it, something is wrong, because I shouldn't be sad. I shouldn't feel like I'm bad or something. And in Sweden, it has come to that point, actually, that some soccer clubs with the younger kids, they try not to count the goals in a game. They try to protect the kids from realizing that team made 7 goals and we made just 1. They try to erase that part because they get so emotional. They don't want to pressure the kids, which one way is impossible, because the kids knows anyway, they count the goals themselves. But it's an attitude in society that makes it, that actually tell people that you can't really manage your emotions, because we have to protect you from your own emotions. And that's the opposite of training someone to deal with emotions like a real competing person must. You can't be top of the world in a game if you're not good at dealing with loss or failure. It's impossible.
So let's take that back to the workplace. So we have this context of intense polarization. People are struggling with well-being. We have polarization. We have a loss of skills. It's deeply problematic. And many companies are saying, do we really have to work on well-being? That's a cost. Is it a cost? Is that the right way to think about it?
It's a fantastic investment. Burnout is really expensive for companies, and we have to shift our mindset and really look at burnout and tired employees and people with problems and people without the tools to deal with frustration, anxiety, uncertainty, etc., as a big cost for the company, because it increases absenteeism, fatigue is terrible, you're more vulnerable to making mistakes, etc. So, and it's very expensive. Even there are many studies that quantify the dollar cost of burnout, and it's huge.
Trillions of dollars a year in the US alone.
So it's really nice that companies are doing, and there are companies like Accenture, etc., that are getting more involved in mixing the personal and the work well-being and making this more integral, more holistic, because that's the way it should be. It's physical, emotional, purpose-driven, financial, your relationships, etc. Everything impacts your personal life and your work life. So it's a fantastic investment. And maybe we can retain more employees if we invest more in these aspects.
So Paco agrees with you. Fantastic investment, but leaders maybe not yet realizing that.
Yeah.
But I would like to make the picture a little bit more complex. And first of all, at least not in Sweden, I wouldn't say that workplaces are polarized in a sense. And polarization has been, we should be a little bit careful about the word sometimes, because it's one thing measuring polarization in social media spheres and social media general, and among people. There are polarization as well, but don't push it, at least not in Sweden and Scandinavia and Northern Europe, don't push it too far, because it's also something that media pushes because it's an interesting conflict. But when it comes to workplace, I think one of the reasons that companies might be unwilling to invest in well-being to a certain degree is that the outcome is uncertain. You don't know how to do it. It's not that I don't care about my employees. I don't know how to do it. And I mentioned before a person who has been becoming a manager because they're skilled at some kind of technical topic or something. They're good at what this firm is doing, for example. They are really skilled at that. It doesn't mean that they are good at being this kind of psychological leader and manager that is demanded today. And also, I think to put another perspective, to some degree, I would agree with some employees might be saying, why are people so dissatisfied? At least in Sweden, a workplace, if you work in an office workplace in Sweden, you are probably about the top 10% of physical workspaces, or top 2% of physical workspaces in the world. And usually Swedish employees, they are good at being flexible about children. You can leave earlier, work back home, and so on. It's hard for me to really identify the structural problems. There's also something about expectations, interpretations, a general sense of the world. How is society moving forward? Am I feeling secure, and so on? So from a Swedish or maybe Scandinavian perspective, work life is, if you're in an office, it can be hard. It can be pressure.
We're all wanting to move to Scandinavia.
Yes, you're welcome. I'm not saying it's perfect, but there's
it's not polarized. It's not transactional. People are nice to each other. Crazy.
Well, then you haven't read the news from Sweden the last couple of years. So dig into it and see. We are top one in shooting people right now, except for US maybe. So we can get back to that in another time. But my point is that I think companies reasonably might be asking, how am I sure I will get a result for the money? Because I don't really know what to do sometimes.
And when we promote people, as Saul commented here, we promote people because of their technical acumen. As you've all mentioned, that doesn't mean they're good managers, and it certainly doesn't mean they're good with people. And yet the demand of the job has changed. And what managers have to do, it's not the same as what managers had to do a generation ago.
Joshua, just some words come to my mind. First of all, leadership alignment. Second, priority in vision, in all the model that we can share around the company. And sure, the courage to try to do the first step, because my idea is that the awareness on this company is not so clear for people. So to be aware about the competencies, how to improve, how to practice the way to improve these companies is not so clear for people and for manager. So they have some competency, they don't know, they have to apply every day in every moment, because this competence can change the picture, the way, the result, the team, the status of the team.
Well, we are unbelievably running out of time. And I have one more piece of data I want to share with you. Again, we won't really get into this now, but in just a couple of weeks, the State of the Heart report will be out. We'll drop a link in the chat for everyone. We have a webinar on October 6th where we're going to release it and share the data. So sign up for that, and sign up to get the report if you'd like, if you can't come to the webinar. There's this one more slide, which is very intriguing to me. And this is just a part from the report. There's a lot of data here, but what you can see is different sectors have been affected by these burnout drivers in different ways. And as we think about the early pandemic and late pandemic, or peak of the pandemic and hopefully recovery stage, what we see in green is the 2018 to 2021. And you see every sector on this graph, except for energy and oil, went down in that period, but to different degrees. So finance went down a little bit, whereas food services, restaurants went down dramatically. And, that makes a ton of sense. But that sector was traumatized by the pandemic. But then when we go to this recovery period of 21 to 22, we see, some recovery in IT, but we see a number of sectors where it went down again. The biggest bounce up seems to be agricultural and fisheries, which is intriguing. And I have no idea why this is, right? I just have the data. And then the sector that has had the kind of worst pummeling in this latest phase, which is so interesting, that pharma and biotech, which had a very mild decline during the pandemic and had a pretty high level in this area. People are really struggling there. And again, this is across 140 countries. Anybody have a thought you want to share on this? We'll have to have another panel just about this slide.
It's confusing.
Yeah.
It's confusing. Yeah. Also about healthcare.
Yeah. And we see in healthcare this
Well,
again, it makes sense that in early pandemic there was a lot of struggle, big decline in well-being, and good news, small increase in the recovery period.
and
Education,
also
same.
maybe another factor is that once the confinement was and the pandemic was more or less under control and vaccination was had advanced, people wanted to go back to their lives just the way it was before COVID. And
Mhm.
I don't think we took some time to reflect on all the positive things that we learned from the pandemic in education, which was my sector, and I see it's a little behind. Everybody wanted to go back to class like it used to be before. And no, there are so many positive aspects that we need to move forward. So the pandemic kind of stopped and we started to forget about the forward-looking mindset. And we were so attached to how life was before. And of course, in pharmaceutical and the medical field, everybody must be exhausted still. It's still, must take a lot of time to recover from that.
Yeah, and we
Mentally,
saw that big
they were
decline in pharma as a space where there was like tremendous work happening during the pandemic and early pandemic, and now in the late pandemic, maybe more burnout.
and maybe not too much recognition of all this effort that they've done. Maybe they're still waiting for something from our part.
Yeah. Well, I want to end with what's your takeaway from today? What's on your mind as we leave today? So, who wants to go first?
For me, that the work is hard because it's a change of mind, and that we can apply every day, step by step, and not all immediately, because people don't are able to receive all this. So for me is to continue to believe on this, to study the number, to use the data to better understand, and to be an example on the behavior, on the competency, on the applying emotional intelligence. That's my Nobel goal, my personal Nobel goal, in order to help people to really apply the change, applying the transformation. In an Accenture, we live with the change, with the transformation, and the change is our normality.
Yeah, and Emanuela, you're also building capacity internally in your people so that they can go out and do this hard work. And I know that emotional intelligence is a big part of that in your work. So thank you for that.
And awareness, 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 and awareness.
Carla, what's your takeaway?
Well, I'll continue with the word I chose, excitement. I think these are exciting times because change is multiplying and at a much faster pace. And it's exciting because we're finally putting in the agenda, like Emanuela said, the awareness of the importance of these subjects are in the agenda. And they weren't a couple of years ago. So that's very positive. And we need to, this is an opportunity to move fast forward and provide, I think we need to provide people from the very young age with the tools to be in control with their lives, to define a destiny. Purpose is finally in everybody's agenda. Define a destiny, fall in love with it, learn to live with illusion, embrace the ups and downs, and the downs as a hurtful but learning experience, but always forward looking. And that's the best recipe to remain young. And it's the best anti-aging program in the world, for me at least.
Frederick.
Well, I think, as you have heard, I think there are many different factors behind well-being at workplace, and there are so many things going on at the same time. And I think it's important to, what I take from here, it is so important to improve the skills that will always be useful when dealing with change, that the skills to handle your own internal life. Those might be the most important to invest in, because you can't really teach people exactly what they need to know in 1 year or 5 years, talking about chat GPT or something like that. You don't know where we're going to be, but we know that you will have an internal life. You know that this change will happen and go on now for some time, because society is changing to next level, to another sustainable paradigm, hopefully, and that change will cause stress, opportunities, and so on. So being able to manage that part of yourself. But I think also as an employer, you must be able to take enough but not too much responsibility for your employees. Some things you have to deal with yourself. I mean, you can try to improve the tools and give people the tools and train them in some sense, but the work then has to be done by you. And what we can offer is a guide to find meaning. Because meaning, like Viktor Frankl wrote about a long time ago, meaning is a vaccine about depression, anxiety, meaninglessness, of course. And that is something we need to have in the workplace, since we spend so much time there. So bring meaning and talk about the tools to create that good internal life.
Well, I've been thinking about this Pursue Noble Goals piece today in our conversation, and that there are two parts. There's having the noble goal, and there's feeling that you can pursue it, and that sense of efficacy. And I hope that in our workplaces and in our communities, and particularly for younger people, that we open up the conversation more to say, what does it look like to pursue this? What does it look like to actually make the changes that we need to make? So with that, thank you all for watching. Panelists, thank you for being here. Thanks for interacting in the chat. Panelists, if you can stay on for a minute, please do that. And we will wrap up here with a little closing video, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.